All right, here we go. This is the System Failure Podcast number 58.
58. A nice round sum, eh, Brian? Very exciting.
Yes, sir.
Well, for you, our dear System Failure fans and listeners, we've got another treat for you today. Our dear libertarian friend, Sir Christopher Meyer, has returned once again to bless our microphones with his opinions. We'll say hello to the fans. Sir Meyer.
Hello to the fans. I recognize now that as a third-time visitor, some of you may recognize my voice, and that's flattering. I'm happy to be here. I'm here not just as a token libertarian, but I heard your regular posts talking about what they were planning to contribute to today, and I had some thoughts, and I candidly, I inserted myself right into this conversation with a goal of perhaps challenging them to define their language in ways that could convince me or not.
Well, I can confidently speak on behalf of we two, Brian and me, and all of System Failure Nation. It's a delight to have you back, sir.
All right. Well, I guess the topic we wanted to get into broadly was that of spiritual awakening.
Yeah. Well, I know, Brian, you had regaled our listeners with some of your progress on that front over the past 3 weeks. Have you got any likely updates for us today?
Well, sure. I was doing some meditation this week, which I guess ChatGPT was saying I should do. One thing I told ChatGPT to, ask if it could make me cry, or I was trying to get it to stop. I wanted it to be like a high school football coach, like the one screaming in Rob Gronkowski's face with flecks of spit going everywhere, because it's a little soft and lovey-dovey sometimes, and so I need someone to coach me up here.
Okay, so did you ask this of ChatGPT out of the blue? Did you start a new window and be like, ChatGPT, make me cry, or was there a broader context already underway when you made this query?
Well, it was mostly out of the blue. It's just that when ChatGPT talks to you, it's pretty soft, and it's like trying to be personable or something.
Yeah.
And I wanted, cutthroat analysis of my situation.
Okay. So did you want it to make you cry because it had listed all of your personal faults and most shameful secrets, or did you want it to make you cry with inspiration and joy?
Well, it was more like I just wanted it to take off the white gloves, or
okay.
and
I see. Gotcha.
And so. Not make me cry by talking about, I don't know, kittens or something, but, just to tell the unvarnished truth. But pretty much what it said is I have to start meditating.
So you said make me cry, and it was like, how about you go in the other room and start meditating? That's not a normal question to ask ChatGPT. Was that pretty much how it went down?
Well, I guess it was like, well, you have to take it seriously in terms of actually trying to make some kind of improvement. Mm. And the thing we've talked about is the importance of doing meditation. Although it had a 4-paragraph response that was maybe slightly more sternly worded than that.
Well, I do recall that Michael Jordan, I think maybe I saw this in that Last Dance documentary. If y'all haven't watched that, I highly recommend. I've never been a basketball fan, but the documentary was electrifying. Anyway, the point is, Jordan spent a lot of time, shooting those free throws, practicing every aspect of the game. The man was obsessed with, he couldn't stand to lose. He was a compulsive competitor, and so he poured his heart into hours of practice. And he also committed a similar amount of time, or the same amount of time, to meditation, to mental preparation. His quote was mental preparation and physical preparation are equally important. So you got to spend time not being stimulated just in your head, just meditating essentially.
Well, what I did is I YouTubed up this video. Well, anyone can do it, but Damo Mitchell, Anchoring the Breath Part 2.
Oh, this is that Nagong Damo, right? He's the Nagong master?
Yeah. And so we talked about this back in the early days of the podcast, but in our previous podcast, we were pondering the nature of magic or what have you. Mm. But to break down the anchoring the breath again, what you do is you sit down and you breathe, and then you listen to your breathing. But what you're trying to do is soak your consciousness, first into your nostrils, and then you move back into your sinuses, and then you try to soak your consciousness into both your nostrils and your sinuses, and then you do your throat, and then you string all three together, and then you do your upper torso, and then you string them all together, and then you do your diaphragm and string them all together, and then your lower abdomen and string them all together. And the important part of the process is letting your consciousness soak into your body, which is something that I don't think I was doing as successfully when I was trying to do this practice in the past. But if you want to talk about the magical properties of your attention or whatever, I mean, it is like a healing thing. Or, well, just after doing this, I don't know, I was like sleeping way better, and I was having much better dreams and whatnot. And
how long were you spending in meditative practice?
Well, it's a 40-minute YouTube video.
Gotcha.
You have to sit down and do. And the first night after doing it, I don't know, I think I had some dream that I was like a backup dancer at a Michael Jackson concert, which is weird. But then also some hot girl who used to work at my job wanted me to like pose with her, like doing a kiss or something. She didn't really want to kiss me, but she did need someone for this picture or something. But you see, it's just funny because I think that in your dreams, it's like a question of like what your ability to like manifest is. Like having like good dreams is like a result of like a state of mind in which you can manifest positive things to happen in your world. Right? So the next night, I was dreaming that I was like playing with like younger versions of Roger Waters and David Gilmour from the Pink Floyd. And I just remember we were playing Raving and Drooling and You've Got to Be Crazy, which are early versions of Sheep and Dogs that they were playing on their 75 Wish You Were Here tour, which were before they had the Animals concept for Sheep and Dogs. They were touring these songs along with Shine On You Crazy Diamond, in addition to playing Dark Side of the Moon. Anyway, see, I feel like that dream like reflected enhanced ability to manifest or something. Because just like we've talked about with the placebo effect, the double slit experiment. But basically what you're doing, I mean, you talked about taking your consciousness and turning it in on itself. Well, this is really like taking your consciousness and just letting it soak into your body. And so, I mean, I guess meditation, well, there's like the visualization of like Michael Jackson.
Thriller.
Sorry, Michael Jordan.
Oh, Jordan. Okay, I thought you were talking about Jackson.
Thriller too. But see, this kind of meditative practice, I don't know about all that. I mean, it probably helps to visualize your success in some ways, but I think it's like a different kind of magic. Well, when you do the anchoring the breath, you're letting the effect of just absorbing your consciousness into your body do the good thing that it does. And it's to that extent that like our consciousness is magical, the degree to which this has positive outcomes. And that is certainly not nothing, is what I can guarantee you if you actually sit down and do it. That's my story.
The Eye of Horus used to be the symbolic, the symbol of the power of human attention.
So I am really happy that I horned my way in here because I am lately in my life, having a shockingly similar experience. I would never have described it as spiritual. So I adopted yoga recently. I started practicing yoga. I've been meditating for a long time. I've been starting to exercise more regularly as a lifestyle change. And I sought out yoga for an unrelated reason. Balance exercises were something I was seeking, and I realized that yoga does all that. And I'm gathering from yoga and from a couple of podcasts that I follow that there is an emerging awareness within Western science about this magic of interoception, which is the word shrinks will use to describe that process of turning your attention onto your body.
Yeah, people say this is the sixth sense, right? You have your taste, your sight, your vision, or whatever, but then you have this feeling of your body, right? And this is the word you used was
interoception.
Interoception. All right, got it.
Instead of there's this is one of many psychological concepts, but interoception, broadly speaking, you can Google this, is just a way that psychologists, neurologists, neuroscientists would describe tuning attention inside of one's body. And there is not, in my research, and admittedly I have a bachelor's level understanding of psychology, that is it. In my understanding of the research, there's not a known molecular or physiological mechanism for this to happen, for the tuning of one's attention to the body. There's not yet known, nobody knows how molecularly this is happening or exactly what is changing in the body, because there's not evidence of either muscle stimulation or fat loss
Right.
or skin regeneration. It's not a known effect that we can measure today.
Yeah, like the placebo effect. We don't know what the Rube Goldberg machine is. What's the causal chain that leads from thinking that a medicine is going to improve your outcomes to it actually improving your outcomes? How do we get across that membrane?
But it is quite observable. All the literature says it happens, that people who exercise regularly in these ways live longer lives, are healthier on a whole range of measures. And I both anecdotally through people in my life and now personally am recognizing that the practice of both this combination of physical exercise with interoception and meditative practice, long, calm periods of time where you are present, mindfully present in a moment, monitoring your consciousness and your body together as a unified being is healthy in any number of ways. We can't necessarily understand the mechanical impacts of that, but as an evolved ape, I am having a bit of a personal realization at the same time that I don't need to understand the molecular basis for all of it to understand that it is happening and experience it for myself. I would never call it spiritual.
Well, the kind of hypothesis you need to test is like whether there's something about our experience is divine or something, and so that when you focus your experience like on your body rather than the pee hub or something, that it does something good. So yeah, I mean, it's a tricky thing to come up with an experiment for, but yeah.
Obviously, the high priestesses of science have no idea about the placebo effect or about interoception, as you just indicated there, Meyer. But like, why would you need the approval or the why would you need the priests in their towers of science to endorse what you're doing, to acknowledge the benefits? Like why do we care what the priests say? They don't have it. To me, they seem like they've got no idea what's going on.
This is exactly the personal awakening I'm having. Is in broad terms. Anyone who knows me has heard me say this. I'm taking more accountability for how my mind works. So, some of the realization I'm having is that there are healthful practices that come from other worldviews than the sort of traditional American Western mindset that I have of going to my doctor once a year, getting regular exercise, eating right, but having little guidance about what that actually means, but having a robust healthcare system that can fix things when they break. I'm for those of you who have never seen me in person, I'm a 40-year-old man with a 41 BMI and a history of heart failure. That's
Is 41 BMI like a lot? I don't really know what that.
There's a line between obese and a clinical definition of morbidly obese, and I'm so ashamed of it. Like I've tried to not remember where that line is. I see. So in clinical terms, all of the health indicators for me are negative. But I am also, if you know me in person, I'm probably fitter and more attractive than the average 40-year-old man with a history of heart failure. Right?
And you're looking better today than you have in quite some time. So you have my compliments.
I'm about 55 pounds lower than where I was a year ago.
Yeah. All right. So there you go.
Yeah. So this is the thing. I don't want to say I've trusted the medical system, but I've not taken the medical system has sort of enabled me to not take accountability for my health in some ways, because my doctor's given me lots of great fixes for things when my body breaks, but isn't able to give me any advice or recommendation beyond, hey, you got to exercise and eat right, but has not given me much direction about what that actually means, or been able to, in some ways, even prescribe nutrition plans in a way that makes sense.
Is it accurate to say that you feel like you went to the doctor and been like, hey doc, this smoke alarm is beeping like crazy. It's driving me nuts. Is there anything we can do? And he takes out his penknife. We'll pop the batteries right out. The smoke alarm problem solved. Send you on home. No problem, sir.
Well, yes and no. I sort of settled into a routine of the once a year talking to about, watching what I eat and exercising. And that was it, right? I was trusting the medical system to take care of my body, and that is in large part my awakening of taking more care of my own body. Something I think we were talking about offline earlier today was I'm coming to view myself, my identity of what myself is, to include my body in a way that I hadn't before. I realized that I had thought of myself as a mind that inhabits a meat suit. And one of the personal revelations I'm realizing is that my body is me, and where the Mahdi Bind line is all contained within my own personal sense of self-identity. So I'm me. I'm more responsible for my life now. I'm more responsible for my health and wellness. And though we can't always describe the molecular basis for that, is my understanding, Western science can certainly recognize that people who exercise every day and eat wholesome nutritional foods live longer. And it weirdly, on this side of the life change, it doesn't seem that hard to make those lifestyle changes. And this is some of the personal revelation that I'm having. It's entirely stemming from my own cognition. I view this in my own language as my own cognition as an evolved ape, to be able to tune my attention to my own body, to improve it and develop it and modify it and maintain it in ways that I need it to. That's I don't want to say comparatively, but it feels like a superpower that we humans have. We can tune our attention to things and affect change to it. And whether that is like organizing and planning a project, bundling sticks so that we can make a fire, or something more practical, or whether that's tuning to like, muscles and joints while we're stretching and exercising, or tuning to our mind and its processing. We are certainly capable of affecting things by tuning our attention to it. My historical Western science background would have simply said, okay, we're doing that. There's some scientific basis for it. And the boys in the lab are hard at work figuring it out. And the realization that I'm having in my life now is the boys in the lab aren't any more useful to me than the yogis down the street. And the yogis down the street are cheaper. And if I just go hang out with them once a day for an hour, I get a lot of great, wonderful, healthful exercise and a lot of stunningly wonderful social interaction from other people who are taking care of their bodies and their souls. And that is also delightful.
But you would not place any of this experience in the realm. You would clearly, we're in the awakening. This is clearly an awakening, right? When you start saying, wait a second, the authorities, the things they say just ain't so, right? That's an awakening, right? So once you're questioning authority, now you're in awakening mode. We're definitely in the realm of, we're not in the physical realm. We're definitely in the mental realm. So we're inside your head. Are we purely mental, or are we in the realm, the magisteria of spirituality?
So this is partly why I want to shoehorn my way in, is because in my worldview, spirituality is a human construct to describe this thing that we're able to affect with our attention. And maybe it's magic, maybe it's God's will, or maybe it's simply like, some unknown benefit of devoting our focus in a more like mechanical, objective way.
But this is what you're describing, so this would fit the spiritual bill.
This is why I'm here, is because I suspect that when you say spiritual and or you say you have slightly different language, but when I say I'm becoming more aware of my body, I think we're sort of saying the same things. And where we might not agree is where the locus of that awakening is coming from, whether that's inside of us or outside of us, or whether there is, to what are we awakening is a question that anybody who's awakening has, right? Our eyes are opening, and the maybe you could frame it as the fear that I'm feeling as a product of Western science is I'm reflexively feeling I need to stand on the brakes and say, whoa, this sounds like woo-woo spiritual shit that dumb people believe, and I'm trying to give myself a little bit of a brake check on it.
Well, see, there is like the dumb shit that people believe, but then there's like the not dumb shit that people believe, and so it's a kind of a fine line between the two. Yeah. But I mean, the having God be dead, I think, is very useful politically, because we don't really, we just like blow shit up in the Middle East. I think it's helpful. People don't really talk about what's good for the soul. You can imagine like Kamala Harris and Donald Trump having some kind of debate about spiritual well-being.
System failure, as I conceive of it, really is this, the soapbox and the sandwich board, the end is near sign that I now have to like come before people wearing, is that we are in a period of mass spiritual awakening, and that the point of system failure is to compare this period of mass spiritual awakening to the last two major ones, namely the end of the medieval period and the rise of the Renaissance and Reformation 1,000 years ago, and then 2,000 years ago, the fall of Rome and the rise of Christianity. And the last two times that it happened, I think these are inarguably. So let me know if you all have objections. I think those two historical examples are the last two times we had a massive awakening. And these awakenings, they're not just spiritual. They involve the crumbling of economic systems. Because when economic systems hum along efficiently, people don't question authority. People just believe, it's when people notice dysfunction that they then start to turn to the authorities and question them and ask, does the emperor have any clothes on? Oh God, clearly not. And so I would reckon that the last two times, again, starting with the arrival in the Black Death in the summer of 1347 in Europe, and I guess I would say the coronation of Augustus or something, whatever it is that set the end for the. To me, the Roman Empire is really the end of Roman society. The Republican period leading up to the coronation of Augustus in 28 BC was like the high point, right? They got emperors to try to control this empire, but that's why the emperors were the result of that civil war. But the empire just unwound itself over the next 400 years anyway, at least on the Italian peninsula. And so I don't think there's any... the hallmarks of the great spiritual awakenings are distrust in the authorities, the plague, revolutions in communication technology, things like this. Paradigm shifts, like for the Romans, the paradigm shift was the pantheism, polytheism to monotheism. The paradigm shift of the Middle Ages was a shift from the Christian worldview, which came from the fall of Rome, prior, and it was a magical revolution against the Christian theology that turned into a scientific revolution against the theology, and that's the regime we live with today that has now grown long in the tooth, just like the Roman Catholic Church, which was the scrappy upstart hippie rebels during the fall of Rome, but had calcified into a moribund authority by the time the Middle Ages came to a close, and so. The nexus of science and banking, which arose after the collapse of the Vatican and in the Middle Ages, has ruled for 300 years now. But now it's coming to the end of its cycle, and that I think is the context that we're living in, and that is absolutely a spiritual enlightenment, where the Antonine Plague came for Rome, and there was another plague about 40, 50 years later during the crisis of the 3rd century. Also. Then there was the Black Death, of course, for medieval society, and for us, it's COVID. And COVID does not have the death toll that the Antonine Plague or the Black Death had, but it had all of the effects of destroying people's trust in authority, for better or for worse. Then there's the communications technology, obviously, the advent of the bound book, the codex, as the Romans called it. Before then, it was scrolls, right? Scrolls are brutal. They're really, really long. You can't just jump to a specific place in the text easily. The use of the bound book was crucial for early Christians to intellectually take over the Roman Empire, which was in a state of collapse. The other thing that helped them was their books talked about the end of the world, and looking around in the 2nd and 3rd century in Rome, you were clearly living through the end of the world. And of course, then there's communications technology in the Middle Ages. The printing press totally swamped the Vatican. Ideas were coming out faster than the Pope could ban them. And today we have the internet, and the authorities find themselves, again, with the same problem, like the multi-headed hydra. They can't control information anymore. And as a result of that, we're seeing a total loss of faith in the authorities.
And if I may, as a brief interruption, the timely rise of generative AI technologies has made all photo and video evidence of facts completely unreliable. It is easily possible for anybody to fabricate compelling descriptions of events that never happened. Carry on.
When we were kids, there was only 3 TV stations, and everyone believed, Peter Jennings and Walter Cronkite. They were all lies, of course, but everyone had the common reference point to reality, and now the reality has splintered beyond recognition. We're all living in our own personal reality, and the no man's land, the neutral zones of overlap are like getting smaller and smaller by the day. We are really heading into a period. And this was a great pest after the Black Death knocked out a third to a half of the European population. A great pessimism invaded, a great pessimism settled over Europe like a miasmic fog. The smartest person anyone knows was your local priest. That guy was the only one that could read. The only person anyone knows who can read is a local priest. And all the priests died because they were giving out last rites to the dead corpses of the plagues. They all had greater disproportionate exposure to the pathogen. All the priests died. It was a big problem for the Catholic Church because they had to replace the clergy with not so. Remember when the NFL referees went on strike? And they brought in the replacement refs, and it was terrible. That's what the Catholic Church was dealing with in the 1350s and 60s and 70s. And a profound pessimism spread sunk in, and that's kind of where we are today. That really matches the pessimism and the cynicism that's settling over America, like the aforementioned miasmic fog. So I don't know. When I look back, I just think that we are obviously going through a spiritual awakening right now, and that it's like it's a layup to recognize that from a historical perspective. But there are other ways to realize it too, through science or through meditative yoga practice. I mean, there's any number of ways to come to the same conclusion.
When I hear you talking, I as I'm translating it to my own worldview, what I'm hearing is there's one way to view this awakening that you're seeing. The way that I'm hearing it is there's a wave of people taking radical accountability for their lives and the world around them.
Yeah, maybe taking back some of that accountability from authorities who turned out to be not as trustworthy as we might have hoped.
Or presuming positive intent. I in my case, I want to be very, very open about this. I was surrendering. One of the realizations I'm having is that I had surrendered some of my own life to authorities that weren't the appropriate places for that trust. Brian, I'm sorry that you have to edit that sentence.
No, I think you should leave it. That's a glorious.
To take a swing at it, and where I want to be kind is every doctor that I've ever had gave me good advice about getting exercise. They gave me the best advice that they could based on the extent of their medical knowledge. I don't mean to malign the work of any of the individual humans that work in healthcare. I would lay some of our issues at the blame of the institution of modern American science. Some of that is the politicization of modern American science, and some of that is a desire that's maybe American or maybe not, but a desire to release ourselves of the burdens of being responsible for ourselves. So that fiction that I believed that I could go to my doctor once a year, get the talking to, exercise once in a while when it was convenient, and always have a pill to fix something. Like, I fell into that, and I failed to take accountability for myself. Every person that I interacted with gave me really good advice, for the most part. Some of them were jerks about it, but
obviously this is a systemic problem, right? I mean, you don't want to blame the individual when you have a population of people that start having the same problem at the same time. You have a system problem and not an individual moral failing.
In the business world, we would call that blame the process, not the people. Yeah. Right? When you're looking at organizational failures of organizational goals, the first place to start is the structural problems. Do the people have the knowledge, skills, resources, and authority to do the things that they need to do? And I think this is the thing that we're realizing is that frontline doctors in healthcare are amazingly well-educated, fucking short order cooks at McDonald's. They are dispensing healthcare in a for-profit industry that seems to be built on medicating lifetime diseases rather than curing and making healthy people.
Right. All of this within a very limited intellectual paradigm. That's just another lovely layer to the cake. Yeah.
Right. There's a very limited source of knowledge into this. Right. Sources of new medical knowledge in Western science have to pass high bars and very particular bars for very good reasons. And I want to be supportive of those. But the impact of that is new knowledge moves into American medicine very slowly. So when we say, hey, there's value in interoception, regular meditative practice, if doctors can't articulate that and they don't have enough solid science to be able to explain how that works to people like me, they don't. It's easier for them to simply say, get your exercise, eat right. I do yoga, you do you, buddy. And I think there's a lot of people right now who are waking up to those systemic failures, realizing that we can't trust the healthcare organization, not because of a failure of people, but because we can't live lives where we trust our health to outside agencies. Welcome to libertarianism.
Well, I do think that you could conceptualize such thing as a trustworthy public institution. I don't think that is a crazy fiction. We just haven't got it because it's just one of the many ways that the gears or the titanic gears that turn at the industrial heart of capitalism are seizing up and not functioning so well.
It's simply a true statement of our current practice today in 2024. Our healthcare system has certain structural problems. That's not an ought to or shan't do, but
major structural problems. And some of these institutions are invaded by actual malevolent actors. Like the CIA is going to be mostly patriotic, good people, but it's going to have some not so good people at the top. And guys like Ralph Barrick and Peter Daszak over at EcoHealth Alliance and the all of the bizarre stuff that went down in Wuhan to get around the Obama era ban on the developing biological weapons is just something that it doesn't have anything to do with the epistemology of medicine or science. It's just straight corruption. So yeah, there's a lot of disgusting layers to this cake, and people are starting to suspect that the call is coming from inside the house. In other words, and I think it's happening en masse. I mean, we're all going through it. Brian's been talking about spiritual awakenings on this podcast for weeks now. The Tracy the Wise has friends that are in crisis mode. I just think that it just feels like it's finally circa 2012. I was explaining to everything I was explaining to anyone who would listen the manifold glories of communism and about the issues of student loans and that there was something terminally wrong with the trajectory our science was on. But I couldn't get that plane off the ground with people in 2012. But everyone's ready to have that conversation now. It's wild. It's a wild change. It's a change in barometric pressure to sense. So, I mean, am I overstating the case here? And what do you guys think?
I guess I do not think you're overstating the case.
Good. That's what I like to hear. Yes. Tell me more about how right I am.
I mean, I think many people are just... just some people I think are distracted by our crazy system and are sort of caught in the net. But then many people are also breaking free, I guess is what I would say.
Yeah. We're mostly, I mean, I would still call myself caught in the net, right? It's not like I've broken free of the net. But just realizing that there is a net is a huge step, a huge part of the revolution, a huge part of the mass spiritual awakening. The psychic call to consciousness that I think is going on. That is, the core of my system failure hypothesis. So, Myra, I wonder, what do you think of this matter? Have we got you totally convinced that what is happening is a spiritual revolution or a spiritual awakening?
Well, I have to continue to be ornery and say no, but only because I wouldn't use the word spiritual in that context. But I think there's a. I can speak for myself, and what I think I see in the world around me is that it's becoming increasingly easy for people who are, put it in terms that might sound negative, in the way that the internet enables people to connect with echo chambers. There are social media technologies now that are allowing people to connect and share ideas and thought technologies in ways that are hastening the evolution and advancement of those ideas.
Yes, I believe your voice is carrying over one such channel as we speak.
You are reading my mind. It used to be, back when our founding fathers were polishing their muskets, these conversations were being had at pubs and coffee shops, and they were limited to just the people in the room. Full stop. Like, dramatic pause there for the effect. And here on a podcast, you've got throngs of many millions of followers. I presume sending you private text messages with racy photos, seeking your attention.
By the way, we're still looking for our first racy photo, just for System Failure Nation. So, point of order on that.
Good. Good. I hadn't realized we hadn't checked that box yet. So, but point being, like, as an example, podcasts and any one of a million other both technological and also like thought technologies, different ways to communicate. In my professional job, I do corporate learning and development. So one of the things that I study is how to encode and decode information into instructional materials. Indoctrination, in other words. Indoctrination has a sticky, icky meaning to it, but the practice of indoctrinating people with ideas is not inherently icky, and modern social media technologies are making it increasingly possible for anybody with a good idea to create materials that will indoctrinate people into those ideas,
and increasingly more difficult for authorities to stand in the way of alternative ideas.
Right. You cannot stop somebody with ChatGPT and an Instagram account. Yeah. All right. With a VPN, you like someone would need to physically find you and arrest you to stop you from spreading ideas in the way that revolutionaries have been seeking for all time, right?
Tom Paine would have been overjoyed to realize that poor bastard had to write and print his pamphlets and distribute them.
Imagine the apocryphal Paul Revere riding on horseback, fucking live streaming. Yeah. The Redcoats is coming, like splashing his trashy South Shore accent. But I think you get the point. The facilitation of the advancement of thought technology is exploding. We're maybe, to put words in your mouths, what you are describing as a spiritual awakening, I might view as a singularity. The ability for humans to construct and trade and refine ideas and information is so quick that we can create and propagate information so quickly that traditional systems of governance are making less and less sense. In the same way that we've been saying for a long time, America is not governed by horseback anymore. The world is rapidly changing within our lifetimes. The pace of technologic change is making it easier for people to move and trade ideas, irrespective of their jobs and their employment and their family and the countries that they live in, or the countries that they're citizens to. And as a result, I think 20th century capitalist economies, while they were effective and they produced a kick-ass time for us in the 90s, are no longer the structures that we need for modern, connective humans. Humans are evolving.
Agreed on all counts. But you would certainly agree that the fall of Rome and the rise of the Christian church was a spiritual awakening, right? There's no way you can characterize the fall of Rome and the resulting rise of Christianity as anything but a spiritual, right? There's definitely a spiritual component there. I mean, the invention, the moment that gave birth to the Roman Catholic Church, you got to describe it as a spiritual moment. If anything spiritual, that's got to be.
Well, the reason I want to resist spiritual is I want to be quite clear. I am not someone who would believe or I am very skeptical of the existence of what anybody might describe as a god or a higher power. So
the ultimate epistemological status of God isn't really what I'm asking about.
Yeah.
It may be that the inhabitants of Rome all embrace mass delusion at the same moment.
Yes.
But it's still a spirit. You would still have to put it in the spiritual category if this happened to them.
I would think that those people that were living it were having a spiritual awakening. Sometimes that spiritual awakening was happening at the end of a rod. More often than not, it was happening with physical violence and coercion. So
first, physical violence and conversion was used against the Christians, throwing them to lions and colosseums. And they were able to turn that. And eventually become the power structure of Rome itself.
I do think, and I want to be very kind to current practicing Christians, but I think humans, one of the thought technologies humans have developed in the last several thousand years is increasingly sophisticated systems of government that involve what we would now call government and churches. I think the rise of the Christian church in what some people would call the Dark Ages, but after the decline of Rome, was a power vacuum that was filled by whoever the brightest, smartest apes among the apes left over when the smarter apes left. That took the form of the Christian church and sold a yoke or a system of government based on their physical and religious servitude, and sold it to people as a spiritual experience. That's a very jaded view of the nature of the Christian churches, of the various Christian sects, and all religious belief. But this is why I want to be careful about spirituality. Is that I very strongly believe that the spirituality, the spiritual aspects of those awakenings, were not real. They were lies perpetuated to keep a docile population continuing to work for the new overlord, representing the new god, whether it was Yahweh or God or Thor or the banks.
Well, so there's definitely this way in which the idea of God is used as something to tame the masses. The aforementioned peasants.
Yes.
Were we recording when we were talking about the peasants? Anyway,
Can't remember.
but yeah, anyway, peasants, are like in the serf system, they have to work, and most of the days they have to give their contribution to the Lord, and then they have a few days where they can make, they're working for themselves basically, and then on Sunday they go to church and they're told why it's godly.
Yeah, we were definitely recording during that segment. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Anyway, so there is this way in which God or something is used as a way to placate the masses into just doing what they're doing, and you wonder about like poor people who believe in God, but they just, whatever's happening, they just kind of say is God's will, as they're traumatizing their kids somehow, or are not confronting reality. Or there's this way in which the people's belief in God is like some kind of control and not an awakening at all.
God often becomes a method of top-down control. Yes, absolutely. But that's not how God starts out, though.
Well, yeah, and so, I'm trying to talk about what we mean by God here, and so there's this way. See, I was just talking before about little Timmy is like wishing for like a bicycle for Christmas, and so he's like praying to God at night or something, right? And So God's going to like wave a wand and somehow make this bicycle happen on Christmas morning or something. But people kind of have that kind of relationship to God where they want God to like intervene in reality, and I'm sure that doesn't work. But see, now I was talking about manifesting before, and there's some way in which we're constructing this reality. But I mean, probably, I don't think that God is up there. I don't know. I'm trying to like manifest something positive to happen, and somehow God is going to decide that I've been a good boy and going to help me in that endeavor somehow. No, I think the manifesting has to do with, well, there's just something in the works of the system is like what the thing is that like attention itself or something is like the sort of is like the godliness, right? And sure. I mean, God is more like in the system. It's not like someone ruling the individual events that happen on Earth or something like that, right?
Yes. Yeah. I agree that God is a pretty loaded term, but I don't think we need to nail down the exact epistemological like definition of God or necessarily. I just want us to acknowledge that we are in the realm of spirituality here. When you're talking about whether or not the God of the Bible is real, you're having a spiritual discussion. No. What kind of a discussion are you having?
I am having. I don't know what kind of discussion I'm having, but I am quite happy to reject the concept of the capital G God as expressed in the Christian Bible.
Any gods, though. I mean, like, Rome was a theocracy before Christianity and a theocracy after Christianity.
So, in that sense, yes, right. If we're talking about, are we experiencing the same thing that other people are experiencing when they say they feel God? Yes. I think we're there, and my own limited worldview, and here's where I recognize that we're all products of our own experiences. We all view the world through our own lenses. I've been trained to think of that in an intrinsically Western scientific view. So I really am inclined to reject the existence of an outside agent. It's not necessarily an outside power, but the idea that there's an outside entity that's acting with agency doesn't seem to be necessary. Occam's razor. It's easier for me to believe in magic, that we have an unknown ability to influence the world around us, than it is to believe in a God, capital G God with a big white beard that likes harp music and angels.
These are all spiritual discussions. These totally agree. These are spirit. We are in like having the ruling class impose an idea of God on the lower class to maintain control is spiritual, but not an awakening. Mm-hmm. Having the lower classes arise and force the oligarchy to accept Christianity is a spiritual awakening, right? And that, I think, is a much better characterization of the last 4 centuries of Roman civilization on the Italian peninsula than the idea that the oligarchy completely lost control of that situation. Mm-hmm. That's why they had to bend the knee and accept Christianity, right? At the end of the day, it's really the masses who have the power. And that's what the emperors rediscovered during the twilight of the Roman Empire. And that's why Constantine is going to get himself baptized, and why Theodosius made Christianity the state religion of Rome in the 5th century. Maybe this is the call to action for some of us, is finding a new word for this concept that's not spiritual, that doesn't invoke spirit. As a guy raised Catholic, when I hear the word spiritual, I immediately think the Holy Spirit, the capital H Holy Spirit, when I think of spirituality. And I know that's not true for all spiritual worldviews, but it's meaningful enough to me, and I think it's certainly going to be close enough for most Christian people who are raised with Christian worldviews that the word is, well, like other words we've discussed today, is like uniquely off-putting, and might be better served if we find another way to communicate the concept of this idea of whether it's God or magic or an unknown human molecular activity. Richard Dawkins in 2004, I think, nominated all atheists to be called brights instead of atheists because he wanted, for the same reason, he just wanted to dispense with the baggage that came with it.
Yeah.
But I don't know, it's a lot harder to invent a new word than to just kind of realize that we're not talking about the narrow Catholic definition of spiritual or spirit. We're talking about a much broader historical, much more fluid idea of spirituality.
Well, the way in which we've talked about spirituality on the podcast in these 58 episodes, we don't really talk about. I mean, it's pretty clear what we're on about.
Yeah.
But then my question, Chris, is I see. I just don't know if we agree or don't agree then on the nature of spirituality or something.
I don't know either.
Well, we can talk about the nature of spirituality, but I want us to agree that we are in a context of spiritual awakenings, but those two things specifically. Now, that's going to be a very wide net to cast because we could mean anything by spiritual. But I just want to say that that's the map we're on. We're not in the physical world. We're not in mere mental phenomenon. We are in the magisteria of spirituality.
Well, I think spiritual awakening. I mean. Well, we were talking last night about what it's like to be born. I mean, eventually, you just kind of come into this world all of a sudden, and, crazy thing. All of a sudden, you're like a toddler, and you have like these vague memories of being a child, and you're slowly, coming online. And so, like, what a spiritual awakening means is like, it's like that, but more so. Or like it's, you probably go through like, puberty or whatever, and your life goes through a bunch of changes, and you become aware of like all this stuff that you weren't aware of before. And then so a continued spiritual awakening is to wake up to things, that are going on that you didn't recognize before.
Yes, and I think we ought to notice this about spiritual awakenings. They're not spiritual at the outset, right? You wouldn't call the coronation of Augustus or the coming of the Black Death and the fog of pessimism that settled over you. Neither of these things were like spiritual at the time, right? Or even past the coronation of Augustus, like when in like the 2nd century, when things really started to fall apart for the Roman Empire, where it was like they thought it was really the level of dysfunction was utterly insane. In the early going, the spiritual, the awakening happens and then becomes spiritual as it goes. That's what happened in Rome and what happened in the Middle Ages, right? The economic dysfunction that arose from having a third of the peasantry die out during the Black Death led to a whole bunch of dysfunction, and you don't get the awakening part until the Protestant Revolution hundreds of years later, and the Renaissance 100 years later, and the Protestant Reformation 200 years later, and then you get the response from the authorities, the Counter-Reformation, right, and the filling of the power vacuum left by the popes by bankers in the late 1600s.
So this is an interesting perspective. Maybe this is just a way to reframe something for you. This is interesting commentary at a sociological scale, at a historical scale. I was reflexively ready to disagree with one of the first things you said because in my case, my spiritual awakening is not in any way driven by outside events. It's driven entirely by an increasing awareness and relationship with myself.
Okay, well,
so there's
I don't know if I believe
language.
that.
Well, maybe we could challenge it, but as a way to sort of like express a contrasting opinion to create some rich fodder here. At a sociological scale of human control, the development or the social collective consciousness awakening happens after, as a result of events and massive sociological change. At an individual level, I think spiritual awakenings, and this is true both for people who I think who have had positive and negative experiences with it, they happen when they are ready for those things in their own lives. So not as a result of these grand social collapses and plagues or asteroid impacts or Godzilla attacks, but by the sequence of pins that fall in their life in the right moments for them to be open to that experience, whether it's ultimately good or bad for their lives.
That's what it feels like on an individual level.
Yeah.
Right? That's what systemic problems like. To me, it feels like I'm in student loan debt because I lack moral character or because of a moral failing. Mm-hmm. That's how it feels. But in reality, we're talking about systemic problems. You yourself were quoting your BMI, half an hour ago, because you're having the whole country is facing like an obesity epidemic, right? This is happening to everyone at once. It's not an individual moral failing. This is a economic problem. It's because the capitalist mode of production is what's causing the obesity crisis, because they're trying to the food production companies are trying to maximize profitability, and the healthcare industry is trying to get everyone on on a monthly subscription to medications versus caring for their long-term health. There's no economic incentive to care for long-term health. There's only economic incentive for short-term fixes and plugs. The little boy putting his finger in the dike sort of ethos.
Or maybe slightly different language. There's more profit to be found in a lifetime of managing chronic conditions than there are in a short-term intervention of, say, intense diet and nutritional fixes.
So you're now down this yoga path. All of these things have happened downstream of you being impacted by a systemic problem, and it's the exact same story in my life. Like I had major issues because I didn't get enough money to pay these student loans, but there was no bankruptcy escape hatch. So now that had me starting to look at the authorities askance and start to question them. And Brian, we've talked about the screens and the infinite scroll, like the list, like your feed on Facebook, where it used to be chronological, is now an infinite scroll, and you don't get to. It's not chronological. You don't even get to control. They're just trying to cram. They're trying to keep your eyes on that app for as long as possible, so they can cram adverts down your throat. When we examine each of our spiritual awakenings, there are obvious economic reasons. You scratch that lotto ticket, and there's economic reasons right underneath. And so that's why I really think that we are in the midst of the early goings of we're like in the after the Black Death, or after after one of the major crises, during after the crises of the 3rd century in Rome. I think we're there, and I think that these awakenings, as I just stated, they become spiritual mid-trajectory. And so I think that is where system failure fits into the greater zeitgeist.
Maybe here's a way to posit this, a way to frame that back that might fit my ears better. Religious woo-woo bullshit is one of the spiritual ways that human communities affect change. One of the ways that we build consensus and we create and share unified visions. One of the ways that we set unified goals and align our effort to those goals is through religious fervor. And here's my Catholic upbringing. Sometimes that fervor is at the end of a ruler rapping your knuckles. Sometimes that fervor is intrinsic. God loves you and he wants this. Sometimes that fervor is, hey, you're looking to have a good party tonight. You need to sacrifice to Dionysus to invoke his particular partying favors. So one of the reads that I have on what you're saying is, yes, spiritual awakenings follow these events and they precede evolutions or advancements in human society, because that spiritualism is a thought technology that humans have created to affect social change. Yeah,
that's a great way to put it. When the economic system stops working, you can bet that a religious revival is not far behind. Yeah, right. Absolutely. Right. Yeah. I would disagree. I think that a religious revival based on only lies and bullshit is just not going to get off the ground. It's like a stereotype that's not kind of true, Right.
Right. They can't all be snake oil salesmen, Bible thumping tent revivalists.
Most of it is people don't know. Just like the authorities, most people offering spiritualism have no idea what they're on about. Not us though. We're all, y'all can trust us.
Well, the kind of awakening that we're headed for is probably going to have significantly less nonsense than other awakenings in the past, just given where we're at in this technological age.
I would include the realization that the Earth is in orbit around the sun and not the other way about. That discovery epitomizes the transition from the Middle Ages to the modern era, from the Middle Ages to the Industrial Revolution. And I think that we have a similar inversion in worldview coming for us. And I think it has to do with this magic, realizing that our consciousness creates the universe just as much as the outside universe is imposed on our consciousness.
So I have a wonderful thought on this, because a reality that we now understand in 2024 that Galileo didn't understand is it's not strictly true that the Earth orbits the sun. The Earth and the sun assert gravitational pulls on each other along with all the other objects in the universe. The Earth and the sun orbit around a mutual point.
Inside the Earth.
Inside the sun. Because the sun's so fucking big. But what you're saying is there are ways that's a smaller object orbiting the sun certainly affects that sun's orbit. So just and I say this only as a metaphor, right? It's a useful analogy because we all share this traditional classic New England upbringing, in the way that realization that the universe was not heliocentric, or I'm sorry, was not based on the center of the Earth, that we adopted a heliocentric understanding of the universe at some certain point.
Yeah, the geocentric, Ptolemaic, Aristotelian model gone.
Bingo. It's just sort of amusing as a learned person, Brian. To your point, I think one of the advantages that we have as a global human society is that we're better connected and smarter and better educated, and we're going to be better able to navigate these things because we now understand that the Earth and the Sun, the entire solar system, orbit around a fixed point. We don't strictly understand how gravity works, right? This is one of those common stereotypical problems in physics, but we can map it and model it and predict it. We can see that it works, and as evolved humans, we've figured out technologies to calculate it and measure it. And
I'll take issue with that.
We can control it.
Did you know we redefined the speed of light in the 1980s to match observed to match observations, just redefine the length of the meter so that our calculations match a pre-existing ideology. That's awesome. Yeah. I agree. That's what we're trying to do. What you're saying is the idea, the whole point of the game is what you're saying.
As a metaphor, we put a lasso around the idea of gravity, and we understand it enough to be able to predict it and manage it and use it in the way that humans do with everything in our worlds, right? We grow crops, we grow foods, we are amazingly capable of affecting the world around us. We don't need to have a spiritual organ to do that. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. But it's an awareness that I think the world has, and certainly I know that I would say that American society has, that we haven't had at any other time of social change.
I think without spirituality, our ability to affect change on reality, like without spirituality, you're fighting with just one hand tied behind your back. Like we can affect reality with our body, but you can also affect it with your mind. And that's an idea that's always opposed by the powerful in all times and places, because they want us to wake up and go to work and make them money and not start thinking of reality as mutable through mental processes, because that's when the peasants stop going to work. If you thought your job was merely an illusion, and you hated your job, you'd be likely to stop going. If you believed that your bills and your mortgage was an illusion, right? The authorities never want us thinking like that. And that's why, to the authorities, science was the branch of magic that they could endorse. And that's why we have it as our priesthood today. But I think science is a terribly limited epistemology. It is like fighting with one hand tied behind your back, and that's very convenient for power. And I think realizing that is the spiritual awakening that is long overdue.
The running publication issue in Western science, I think, should be a wake up call to anybody who cares about the knowledge management.
Which one? The Lancet, Nature? Which one?
Well, it's just the broad mechanism for how scientific knowledge is gathered and published in Western science, because of our various ethical, legal safeguards and the various public interests of the publication agencies, right? So in order for a smart guy to posit a bit of information and have that information accepted into the grander scientific understanding or the greater scientific milieu, they have to be able to run an experiment. They have to be able to get funding to run that experiment. They have to be able to write a grant to get funding to run that experiment. That experiment has to get published. They have to get through peer review. This is a very real criticism of our modern scientific industry as a priesthood. There is a huge amount of filtering that goes on for new information that humanity is uncovering or becoming aware of, that makes it hard for other scientists or normal people to make sense of what is real or not, because it is so hard to get new information published quickly. And I'm coming at this from a social sciences perspective. The psychological world is reeling with a replicability issue in publications. It's a bit of an exaggeration, but it's forcing a lot of practitioners and a lot of people who study psychology in
it's a huge scandal. None of the major experiments in psychology can be reproduced reliably, and that includes the Milgram and Stanford prison experiments.
All the foundational literature that psychological principles are based on is questioned now because there's such a known problem with replicability, and that's one example of human bureaucracy really limiting our ability to advance and manage knowledge. And that same bureaucracy has other impacts in other disciplines. I follow a number of science and astronomy pods, and they sort of complain about the same issue: the organizational momentum of publishing new and provocative information through legacy channels stems publication of new findings. And for normies, those new findings might be small, but the ones that upend institutional momentum are hard to get published. And those little things are happening all across Western science. And you can point to capitalism, you can point to politicalization, you can point to any number of isms, but it seems to be true that it's happening, and it's hurting us.
It's a universal truism that change in every discipline, change comes from the fringe and not from the establishment, and that is science's huge problem. Now, have you heard me talk specifically about peer review and Robert Maxwell?
Probably. No doubt. We've known each other for a hot minute, so...
Okay, so you would remember this. You would know exactly what I'm talking about. You know how you can go on Google Trends and see, you can look up things like Black Lives Matter or social justice, and you'll see there's huge spikes in 2012 and 13 in the aftermath of Occupy Wall Street. There's another function that Google has, and it's Google Ngram. And versus not instead of searching words on the web, it searches all published material. So you can go back much further than the internet. And if you take the word peer review and type it into Google Ngram Viewer, everyone should do this. You will see that no one cared or talked about peer review up until the mid-60s, 1965. What happened in 1965 to make it so that suddenly peer review is real? It was unheard of in the scientific community before 65, and now it's the gold standard for publication. What happened in the early 60s? The story is this. A Czech spy from World War II, he had a different Czech name, but he changed his name to Robert Maxwell and settled in England after the war. And he had this idea. There was like one or two scientific magazines at the time. He had this idea of creating, proliferating the number of scientific publications, knowing that this would be an automatic subscription for every university in the world. And he did. The number of scientific publications proliferated. He used this idea of peer review to make it so that his magazines, he promoted peer review so that his magazines would have to be purchased by every department at every university in the world. Made a crazy amount of money. And since then, and has really damaged science. You can just see that, like, when you think about the same number of years elapsed between the Wright Flyer in 1903 and the Man on the Moon in 1969. Well, we've come another 60 years since then, and it just doesn't seem like the world has changed as much as it did between 1903 and 1969. Between 1969 and 2024, we've got great tablets and computers, but it's not like we're going from the Wright brothers Flyer to the moonshot. I mean, that was like one person's lifetime. It must have been crazy.
An anecdote that I heard from older professors when I was in college is around the same time the what we now call the Red Scare. There was a concerted effort, a political effort to find and expunge socialists and communists from academia. So it became useful for people to have peers who had to actually do a buddy check to review their work and say, hey, is there anything in here that's going to get me censored or going to get me up in front of McCarthy? Or the inverse. It was also useful for these people to maintain relationships with other people that had no communist or socialist affiliation, so that everybody had professional connections with somebody to protect themselves, and having peers that they reviewed papers with to be able to say, oh, these never talked about communism with me. Well, it was something that they chose. So there's nothing happens in a vacuum. It seems like it was an interesting time for academia to be buttoning itself up in the wake of, the Second World War. There was grand social revolutions all around the world. I could understand how academics would start to get very nervous and start to get very conservative when the world's changing like that.
Well, let me compound that by giving you the punchline to the Robert Maxwell story.
Ruh-roh.
Because we all know that Jeffrey Epstein was very interested. He interviewed scientists all the time at his Manhattan townhouse. He was very interested in science for whatever reason, mysterious reasons. But the interesting part of the story, the big punchline, is that Robert Maxwell's daughter is Ghislaine Maxwell, the longtime consort of Jeffrey Epstein and involved in the sexual blackmail scandal that took his life. And so it's very interesting that her old man is the one that has completely destroyed science with this concept of peer review. Very, very curious. So what we have here is a major awakening, a major spiritual awakening in the offing. It's like a huge zit that's just ready to burst. And remember, folks, you heard it early. We called our home run ball here on the System Failure Podcast.
When in the future, when our horribly mutated descendants are picking through the remains of what they presume to be the internet, and they find this, they're going to be very proud of you.
I think so too. I'd like to think those future people will look back and be like, all right, well, at least some people had some awareness of what was happening to their culture.
So it's not a hook for you, and this isn't an official recommendation at all. But there's a podcast that I listen to with a popular TV host and another guy who's a podcaster that I follow. And their whole gimmick is they are recording these pods to be put into a time capsule for whomever rebuilds the earth after the apocalypse. So their whole stance is trying to explain, listen, I know this is going to sound crazy, future overlords, but this is what happened. I hear that tone from you. You seem to be seeing this impending collapse. You're screaming desperately, punching buttons and pulling levers to try to put the trolley on the other tracks. But you're not optimistic.
I'm optimistic. I think ultimately, we're going to have to go through. Well, this is why the magical idea of the alchemical journey is the great. Like, you just have to realize this is the whole point. Dante couple decades before the Black Death wrote this story about having to go through hell in order to ascend through purgatory to paradise. And I think we have to have faith that, you know, the going through hell, there'll be purgatory and paradise on the other side.
Brian, if I can ask, what do you think about that? I'm understanding you as someone who broadly believes in magical abilities and your ability to perform magic in some capacity, and stop me if I'm wrong. How do you feel about that? I'm viewing it kind of nihilistically. I think Nate's viewing this as still don't quite understand what you mean when you say spiritual, but we're having the same conversation. Brian, I'm curious what you think. I sense your source of spirituality is not what my source is or what Nate's is.
Well, I guess I think that let's just say, you know, your attention like is divine or whatever, or it causes things to manifest, like whatever you put your attention on. And so you can accomplish good things by focusing like your attention like on your body. That is like it is like recuperating as opposed to depleting. Mm-hmm. And I guess there's what you want is the awakening, which is, there's sort of some conflation between like the awakening and God or whatever, because like as you head towards like greater truth, you feel like you're more like in God's light or whatever. But of course, certainly there'll be new challenges once we you know, have some kind of awakening here. You know, we'll just be out of the Garden of Eden into like a new crazy paradigm, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
That's how I feel about like Marxism and social. Like we don't want to pretend that it's a utopian vision for we're gonna be trading one set of problems hopefully for another set of problems, but hopefully it'll be to our advantage. But carry on. Sorry, Brian.
It's an evolution of human society,
yeah.
Right? We want to iterate.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think we talk about magic a lot. I don't know. I don't know if magic is more than just that. And the magic is just that, you know, our attention like is divine.
Our attention is capable of sculpting reality, right? Is that an important piece?
Yes. Well, how are we using our attention to sculpt reality?
That I don't know, but like...
Well, what's an example of using our attention to sculpt reality?
The placebo effect.
Well, that's like within our body. So, I think you can definitely use...
double slit experiment, and then, you know...
You can definitely use...
And I say this as a guy who has run project management development programs, taking the time as an evolved ape to sit down and plan a complicated project that maybe involves coordinating activity with other smart evolved apes is a way that you are manifesting a real world thing in your mind with your mind, not supernaturally. I guess maybe this is my hang up. I hear spiritual and I hear magic and I think supernatural.
What does that mean, supernatural?
Scooby-Doo. I feel like I live my life in a Scooby-Doo episode, where there's lots of people who seem to believe in ghosts and magic and witches and stuff, and they're all just a human wearing a mask.
Do you feel that way about the word paranormal?
Yes.
Do you feel that way about the word parachute? Is parachute something crazy and not worth considering?
Oh, no.
Yeah. Oh, no. Paranormal is that but paranormal does sound crazy and not worth considering.
Well, right, and not because of the etymology of the word, but because of the way.
Yeah, same etymologies, right? That's why I use parachute. Same etymology. Yeah. One feels weird and like, it's embarrassing to be associated, and the other one just a totally normal object.
Right.
Yeah,
when I hear the word parachute, I think of a piece of emergency equipment with a clear label word parachute. When I think paranormal, I think, some hippie selling walking tours around some historic city.
Yeah.
But that's I'm cutting.
Well,
so this is.
I guess I'm skeptical about this word magic a bit. I think, but although I guess maybe I'm open-minded. I think. There's this thing about attention versus intention that I don't think people seem to understand. But definitely focusing your attention on things does seem to foster their growth, and if that's magical, I don't know. Maybe that's magic. Now, I do wonder, is sacrificing a goat or something going to cause some kind of effect on the reality that we're having? Like, can you cast some kind of like magic spells somehow, or set up a pentagram and like light some candles and do some stuff like we were kind of talking about in the last podcast? That's like harder for me to wrap my mind around. But it's very easy to use like your attention to have like an effect on your body. But I guess I have like these philosophical quandaries of just the way that things like unfold is I don't know. Well, it does seem significant somehow. So maybe I have a contradictory notion in my head. But I mean, life has a way of creating like the obstacles that you need to sort of grow as a person, though, right?
Ooh, I hate to keep doing this to you boys, but maybe a way to view that is humans are incredibly adaptive to the challenges that we have, and we are capable of becoming whatever person we need to be to overcome those challenges.
Well, is the system designed to kind of like ultimately we were debating this a bit last night, is like is everything just sort of arbitrary, or is this thing sort of set up for a reason to like kind of create the experience that we're having, or is our experience like arbitrary because this thing was in place for some reason, or was this whole thing set up designed to exist to create the experiences we're happening, or is are we just here as a byproduct of something else arbitrarily?
Those are great questions.
Reality is definitely tailored to us because we are creating reality. That's the whole point of a Jungian synchronicity event. When something happens that makes it, you're like, well, that's just too crazy a coincidence. It has to be that I'm creating this reality in some capacity, or that we are communally creating this reality collectively.
Yeah, I guess I'm pretty inclined to agree that it's not arbitrary. Although, like, where the like rubber hits the road of like what our magical capacity really is, I have some I don't know if I'm in on it as much as Nate is.
Got it. So it sounds like you and I may be closer aligned on that. So let me say this thing that I'm hearing people describe as magic, I feel possible within the confines of my own body, as a way to recover from other health conditions, or as a way to manage health, and certainly as a current practice, my ability to tune my attention to my own body has, we can call it supernatural or magical effects that I can't describe on things within my own body, but I don't necessarily extend that to anything outside of my own body. What do you think about that? Yeah,
that is kind of the question. Well, because that the anchoring the breath video that I was talking about, and Nate has researched alchemy within like a Western tradition a whole bunch. The thing is that like in China, they had like thousands of years of like relative like homeostasis, and not being oppressed by the church. Like there's just a lot more understanding about the power of like the meditation and kind of the mind, and the whole thing about Neigong is like the chi cultivation or whatever. And then so anyway, from what I understand about like Chinese traditions on this, and I'm really not a huge expert, but there's a lot of belief in the power of the mind to have a big impact on your body, and I don't know anything about what the ability to kind of impacts on things outside of your body. But there is just this way in which, I don't know, like, yeah, the things happen the way things sort of do happen the way they're supposed to. We kind of do create these like perfect obstacles for ourselves. But see, I think that's part of the non-arbitrary design of the system, in that it is kind of designed to do the right things, or to make there's got to be like consequences for your actions if you F up terribly, right? So
do there? I don't know. One of our, not to pivot us to politics this late, but it kind of seems like there's a certain figure in our society that's being lauded and put in a leadership position specifically because of his ability to avoid accountability or consequences for his actions. Meaning, maybe one of our presidential candidates is.
I mean, I feel like that's pretty limited analysis. I mean, the man is willing to like straight up say that the news is fake and lies, and so I think we have a man who was in 2016 and maybe in 20 was never palatable to the media, because he's willing to just go head to head with the media and toe to toe and just insult them openly. So the media always paints him in this like Hitler-esque light. And I think that in 16 and maybe 20, this man was also unpalatable to like the deep state and to the establishment politics. But I think the establishment politics has shifted the chessboard around to incorporate the Donald. So now he's just a part of the machine. But he's still completely intolerant. The media will still scream that this is an emergency from the top of their lungs. Who believes it anymore, apart from our friend Sir Meyer here?
Well, the art of like avoiding consequences or whatever is, just because some people are better at like avoiding like accountability for their actions. It doesn't really mean that there's not. You can't just have a system wherein like if you like do stuff, it doesn't matter, right? You think that the Donald is like evidence that our actions like don't have consequences or something?
No. Here's what I mean. We were talking. Let me get my poop in a group. We were talking about the capacity for us as agents to do magic, and we were a little bit of kicking the tires on where the extent of our magic is. And one of the things that I'm trying to pressure test is Donald Trump's unique ability to navigate through these situations with an enraged base is evidence of a high emotional intelligence, a high degree of showmanship, a number of traits that in the language we've been using today, you could describe as being somewhat magical. He's quite expertly capable of tuning other people of indoctrinating other people and tuning them to his priorities and activating them for his purposes.
And he's able to be successful because he's drawing upon a festering discontent with the legacy authorities that's part of any awakening.
He's sculpting the world to his benefit. In that sense, as he's a magician. When I'm doing yoga, I'm sculpting my mind and my body to my benefit. Donald Trump's life is different. He's sculpting something. He's adopted some skills and some strategies that I'd be tentatively willing to call magical only in the moment of this podcast. But he's able to assert his will on reality.
The Greeks worshipped the word as holy, almost in the way they meant it, almost in the sense that Brian was talking about attention earlier, or that the Egyptians considered attention or concentration to be magical. The Greeks considered the word to be that, so much so that the Gospel of John, which is just it's Christianity. It's Christianity as a extension of Greek philosophy. The first words in the Gospel of John are in the beginning. In the beginning, God uttered the word, and the word became holy. I'm screwing up my Gospel of John now, but these are the first words of the Gospel of John. So yeah, watching the Donald in the power of speech is, you could think of that as action at a distance or magic in a certain magical context.
Well, I guess I don't.
Yeah.
The persuasion and stuff. And like doing stuff with people's psychology. There's just something to be said. Well, there's just a certain ability to feel like right about issues and not have other people like persuade you off of your position. Like to think that you're the best and not give up on that idea.
Well, I do not think that we're going to get to the bottom of what attention, what magic or spirituality actually is on this podcast. But I do think it sounds like I've got you guys convinced, or at least we're talking in that arena. So, have I got you guys convinced that we not only are in awakening, but we are experiencing a spiritual awakening, that the awakening is spiritual in nature? And we've been using words like magic and paranormal. So let me just add this little cherry on the sundae, my final piece of evidence to convince everyone in the sound of my voice that the awakening that's happening is definitely spiritual in nature is, of course, the reappearance of the lights in the sky, right? We are really talking about the paranormal here when we start to talk about the nature of the awakening. I don't think it's a coincidence that the lights in the sky are back. So that's what I think. So, given everything we've talked about, and even though we can't agree on the specific nature of the definitions of spirituality or magic or paranormal, we have to admit that is the realm in which we are currently. That's the realm in which the current awakening is taking place, right? I feel like the lights in the sky are the final coup de grace. The fact that the UFOs are back, or that they're intensifying their presence.
Well,
I think really speaks to the fact that we are in a paranormal or magical or spiritual sort of awakening and not some other kind.
I don't know. Like the UFOs don't really. They have yet to really matter to me, other than that they're super interesting to hear.
But it's definitely paranormal, though. We're definitely in the paranormal.
Well,
maybe in the true etymological sense of the word, in that there are things that we are increasingly observing that are outside of normal.
Yes.
well, is it going to be the case that there's some kind of? It depends on like what the ultimate truth is about the UFOs. I mean, are they aliens? Or are they humans from the past that have advanced technology that kind of went away? Or are they drones from another planet? Or are they some kind of psychological manifestation as a result of? Is it just
they're
some
measurable
are
on
they,
FLIR radar systems?
Are they
I feel like.
sparks kind of flying as a result of the awakening that's going on? Because apparently these things show up.
I've always loved the theory, the school of thought that they are a divergent form of life that has evolved deep under the oceans and the earth. Therefore, creating a technology where they're able to where they're able to manage like pressure and mass. Right, if a highly technological civilization has evolved deep within the Earth's crust, they're able to build high pressure systems. They're able to move through those systems, move through water. That they've somehow developed highly advanced technologies to be able to move in and out of either the ground, the water space, or the atmosphere in ways that we simply don't understand. And that's paranormal only because it's fucking weird to us, us evolved apes. But
we clearly are working with an incomplete worldview, right? It's like when the plague comes around, it's going to be really hard to guess that's ultimately going to result in overturning the geocentric or Aristotelian model of the solar system. It's really hard to predict that, and that's at the phase we're at now. So we're guessing what the big inversion of reality is going to be, and maybe it's that, or maybe it's extra dimensions, or maybe it's aliens from Zeta Reticuli. But whatever it is, we are dealing with not just physical and mental. We are definitely out in the spiritual. We're definitely in the outfield of spirituality at this point.
I would say it's not a definite that the world of spirituality is separate from the mental and the physical, but I think I would agree with you to your presumptive close earlier. I would say that we are probably three magicians on broadly the same journey. I wouldn't describe spiritual awakening in any way. But that's also because I'm a product of my own life and experiences, and I am what I am. So I intrinsically reject I shouldn't say Christian, religious dogma, because it is obviously instituted by humans for the sake of controlling other humans.
Well, maybe, but you're still talking about spirituality, even if that's all it is. This is still under the spirituality umbrella, in the spirituality tent. We have to agree that I think we have to agree that the revolution that ended Rome and the revolution that ended the Middle Ages were both spiritual in nature, and explicitly so. And so it's hard for me to imagine that that future historians won't also consider this the slave system. The slave system of antiquity collapses, we get a spiritual awakening. The medieval system of Europe collapses, we get a spiritual awakening. And now the capitalist system, the heir to the legacy slave and feudal systems, is now also collapsing. It just seemed it wouldn't match the historical pattern if it was an awakening but not a spiritual one.
Well, it could be if one of the advancements in human civilization is a recognition of the cyclical nature of the rise and fall of religious dogma. That if the awakening that we're having now is an awakening away from thinking of the world in terms of magic versus reality. That we're not thinking about religion and magic and paranormal and supernatural as in the same weirdo bucket. We may all very much be under the same tent, and I think we are. I think spiritual is the wrong name for the tent, because I think one of the things, the way that I posit the future evolution of humanity is we're going to look back on this time period of human civilization as a time when we were trying to form early human collectives. We were first trying to organize our labor. Religious and political and family and social systems have been the roots of all of those things. I think human civilization is prepared to move beyond that. Now, that's me being also a sci-fi fan, so that sounds kind of loopy. Totally get it. I'm N of one here, but that's in the way that I see the next 1,000 years of human society moving. This is why I would resist the idea of calling it spiritual, because I think spiritualism is a primitive practice that we need to be mindful about, because there are bits of that primitive practice that are appropriate for us to continue to practice, but as
bits that we maybe lost and need to rediscover.
yeah, for sure. There's so much lost knowledge. Just as an acontextual example, I picked up native plant gardening, native North American gardening. There is so much family and cultural knowledge that was lost when European colonialists literally stomped through native farms, not recognizing that farming technology in North America looked different. So much of that knowledge was lost. It's tragic. Spiritual knowledge, what you might call spiritual knowledge, is the same. I might call that health and wellness knowledge, or knowledge about organizing and activating human behavior.
Well, I mean, come on. We got UFOs, and we got the placebo effect, and we got the double slit experiment in the mixing bowl here. And all of these things are part of the awakening.
Well, they are all things that we can't explain. I don't see a reason to attribute a common cause to all of those things. Here's where I reject the capital G God. There doesn't need to be a single agent responsible for these things for us to recognize that they are all paranormal.
Yeah, so I mean, I think you had to say what you want to say about magic or something. I feel like you have to do something with magic that, like, I mean, just to, like, saying that the placebo effect exists. I mean, well, yeah, I mean, well, sure. I mean, that is, well, it is indication of our, the somewhat divine nature of our attention. Like, the divine nature of our attention, I think, can't be argued with. But in terms of, like, are we manifesting UFOs, our power to, like, just realize our will? Like, is there really some, like, magic in our ability to realize our will? I mean, that's kind of what we're talking about with magic, I guess. I guess, isn't that what magic means, is to, like, instill your wants on the universe?
It's right? To understand that the universe, that your mind sculpts reality, not reality sculpting your mind, right? That is the.
But obviously, I mean, there's some kind of interplay. We obviously have some ability to. I mean, I think we're manifesting the world to some extent in, like, this communal waking dream, like we've talked about. But it's just how much is magic, like, and how much future is in that. And I mean, being able to realize your will on reality. Well, definitely if you're of sound mind and, like, eating healthily and exercising, like, you definitely, I think, increase your ability to do that. And so, yeah, Donald Trump is probably, well, he definitely knows, I guess he knows how to realize his will on reality and avoid consequence. I don't quite know how magic fits in with Donald Trump, I guess. But, yeah.
I would say that Donald is more of it shows that we're a part of an awakening as an undertaking, but he doesn't, the spiritual part, I don't think it really, other than the fact that you could just say that he has a power, the power of his words seems to be able to move the needle for some people, but I just think that what's really happening is that no one likes the authorities, and the Donald was uniquely capable of overcoming the gates the authorities had on entry into the political arena, and that's
so for what it's worth, that's all I mean when I say Donald Trump is a magician. He's one more magician in our tent. Right, he's just like us. I don't mean to say that Donald Trump is a godlike figure or has attained spiritual power. Donald Trump is simply a smart ape, just like all of us other smart apes, who's cultivated some skills to shape reality to his will. And I'm charitably ascribing that to the concept of magic, because I'm reluctant to ascribe it to something supernatural. But that's where I'm trying to jam words in.
Well, I think there are a lot of people who don't believe don't really understand the, like, the divine nature of their attention, and that, like, focusing on your attention on something will cause it to sort of grow, or it facilitates it lends life to some things, whatever you're focusing on, right?
What do you mean when you say the word divine? When you say divine attention, could you talk about that?
Well, I'd just say your attention is divine, because when you focus it on something, it makes that thing like if you focus it on your body, it will improve your body, or you can focus it on, I don't know, like if you go on the internet, which is designed to make you angry, you will become unhappy. if you doom scroll on social media. And so
your mind and your attention has power. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and I think that people don't really that isn't, like, really a broadly understood idea. So I mean, there's definitely something to be said about that. And then, so what? But I guess magic as a broader idea. I guess I don't really like, because I don't know. I mean, I think the power of meditation does say something important about the nature. Like, I think it implies that we're not here arbitrarily, and that like your existence is like meaningful and important, and that's all good stuff. But I guess when we start talking about magic, again, I don't really love it. Although I think there is definitely, like what you were saying before about the gravity of the sun versus the earth, and yeah, I mean there is some kind of interplay there. Yeah, I guess that's where I'm at.
Yeah, in a physicist would tell you that in some foundational sense, the molecules that compose our body interact with all molecules in the universe, right? We all have gravitational pulls and a number of other effects on each other that manifest in other ways, right? Are even the molecules that compose our bodies never actually physically come into contact, because they're bouncing off of each other because of their electrical polarization. So that's all a Western physical construct that describes the mechanics of our bodies. But the point is that there are. It seems to be possible for objects to influence other objects in ways that aren't visible to human observation.
Oh, that's what string theory is. It's totally measurable. Yeah. We have no idea how these particles are like tethered together. Yeah.
So when I hear the word magic, when I seriously consider the word magic, that's the kind of realm that I'm thinking. And to be as respectful as I can, it's not Star Wars, the Force. It's not a Harry Potter magic wand. It's not a Game of Thrones kind of hereditary thing. It's simply that there are physical effects in our universe that humans have cultivated in lots of really, really cool ways, an ability to control and manage and manifest. We grow crops, we wear clothes, we take pharmaceutical drugs, we can meditate and tune our attention to our bodies. We can do a lot of magical things that at various points, or we can do a lot of things that at various points in human society have been viewed as magical, but are in a sense just thought technologies. And what I'm dancing around is that classic Arthur C. Clarke quote, right? Any sufficiently advanced technologies didn't describe it from magic. Everything that I hear, everything that I've observed as someone describing as magical that I find credible is something that seems to me that there is likely some knowable physical explanation for. We simply aren't able to observe it. That's my worldview. I find some solace in that, in understanding that the universe is a complex but arbitrary system that, as a human being, I'm a product of. That I have I have this evolutionary birthright of being able to cultivate the world around me to shape my reality. And if there is a magical organ in my brain that can let me like turn lead into gold, or I say that fantastically, like whatever the capabilities are that we can unlock by exploring our ability to tune our focus onto things. I've been super blind about that my entire life, and I am becoming more aware of that.
That's because you're assuming you're a small mind inside a large universe. I think look, you asked Brian what he meant by divinity. Like, we are all instances of a pattern, a genetic pattern. That pattern has a existence to it. That pattern exists outside of space-time, right? We exist inside the prison of space-time. But there's a whole reality outside of space-time. We are creating space-time as a proxy for true reality. So when all the dross of everyday matter of the world that's around us is not reality, it is a dummy that we've created inside of our minds, right? You feel like you're sitting inside of a living room. You feel that you're sitting there with your body and your head is on top of your shoulders and your mind's located inside your head. But really, the entire observable universe is like this room is, you have a model of it inside your mind, and you have a universe, that room is inside of a universe in the model in your mind. And inside the model of your mind, you have a head with on top of your shoulders. So there's like the head in which the ideas are contained, and then there's the head that's contained within the brain, right? So it's like how many you have. So you have two heads: your real head, which is inobservable, and then you have the head that you've created a model for, which you've never yourself seen, only a mirror reflection. But it only exists as a mental construct. So like what I'm saying here is that we as individuals have a fate, but we're trapped in time. the pattern of which we have a part has a status that exists outside of time. And that and we have to realize that we are creating our own reality, and that whatever objective reality is, we cannot access it. We only have access to this proxy of it. And there is no reason that things within that this is what the power of the mind is such that there's no reason for things within our matrix, which we're all generating. Right? There's no reason that it's like a computer game you've programmed. There's no reason why things in the computer game have to follow. They follow the set of rules you make up for them or impose on them. And I think that is spiritualism, paranormal. That is the awakening that is lying in store for us here at the end of history. And I think it's coming soon. When you think about time if you swap out the temporal dimension, the thing you measure with the stopwatch, and just imagine that thing, like it's 90 minutes from here to Boston, right? You could also say that it's 150 miles, right? These are two ways of relaying the exact same piece of information. So if you swap out the stopwatch for a ruler and you have a 4D, we can't really imagine a 4D cube. You can picture a line and a square, and then you can extrude the square into a cube, but there's no way to cram another orthogonal 90-degree angle in there. So we just get out the stopwatch. Well, here's what the cube is like at 1 o'clock. Here's what it's like at 2 o'clock. Here's what it's like at 3 o'clock. If you swap out time for distance, you can immediately see that then humanity has this shape to it. You can imagine this shape with individual people making more people, and it's like a broccoli or a tree. Branches make more branches. That thing exists. If that thing exists outside of time, then the human trajectory or career has a purpose or a teleology to it that is mysterious. We don't know what it is, but when you use it's like we have many single-celled organisms that comprise our body. When we live in a symbiotic relationship with all of these systems, and a white blood cell doesn't really know why it has to attack and kill bacteria, but that's just the function that it carries out. And we're carrying out a function, though we may not be aware of it. And I think that when you act in a way that's aligned with that function, you maybe could call that divine, or in concert with the broader purpose of the pattern, which is different than the broader purpose of each of us individual instances of the pattern. But whatever the case may be, I do think that realizing that this is a simulation that is a dummy or an analog or a proxy for real reality, and that therefore we can do whatever we want in it, is the fundamental of reality, the fundamental inversion that matches the fundamental inversion the denizens of the late Middle Ages and early Renaissance went through when Galileo was looking through his telescope and confirming the book written by Nicholas Copernicus, who himself had used the calculations from the Dutch astronomer Tycho Brahe.
I don't think we can do whatever we want in this reality, though. Or you can't jump off a building and expect to fly, right?
We can. So collectively, I think we can really we can believe in all kinds of miracles collectively. And I think that. I'm wondering if that might not actually be within the realm of possibility, bending and breaking the rule. But this is what the Matrix delves into. So I'm not willing to close the door on that, even that seemingly crazy reality. There's strange stories. Y'all know who Springfield Jack is? He was this weird figure from Victorian London who many people... He appears in the Assassin's Creed game that takes place in London. He was this guy that could apparently jump up onto second or third story houses. The police would try to track him down. He would wear a devil mask, and there's just all these weird stories in the London papers of the day. Mystery that's never been solved. So was Spring-Heeled Jack real? Was he someone that figured out how to bend the rules inside the Matrix, or was it all a collective mass delusion? Does it really even matter when we're thinking about the past? We're thinking about not what the state of the Matrix now, but we're relying on this shared memory of the past that's mutable to all kinds of prejudices and assumptions. And
the Matrix, I don't think it's, at least I think it's a collectively realized dream, and so I think it's hard to have more input on it than
well, you're constrained by what your fellows believe more than you're constrained by some kind of hard reality.
I just to share a good-natured conflicted viewpoint, I would think that both of those things are true. I've sort of come to view the world as we are each an independent entity that forms a mental model of the world around us. We use our various sensory organs and our perceptual systems to create a mental model about the universe outside of our bodies. That universe includes other people. right? So we are a line I like because I've started practicing yoga. One of my instructors ends every session saying, "The light in me sees the light in you." So coming to view other humans, or by extension, other things with agency, as being separate somehow from different things, is interesting. But it's also been somewhat enlightening because it has helped me wrap language around some of the conflict that I see between that and those traditional Judeo-Christian worldviews. In that I see us as evolved apes. We are not that much more complex than any animal or a plant growing on anywhere on the earth. But we are.
You don't see a vast difference between like yourself and a chimp, yourself and a silverback?
I see a difference not a difference in kind. I see a difference in evolutionary complexity. We have evolved cognitive abilities. We've evolved these attentional abilities to tune our attention to things. We've also evolved a capability of changing and adapting our bodies. So, for example, one of the things that chimps don't do and can't do is exercise. Chimps don't train their muscles. They are naturally big and strong. They eat a bunch. They live an active lifestyle. They live what a human would consider an active lifestyle. Chimps' bodies don't respond to physical training in the way that our bodies do. So along with developing cognitive abilities and opposable thumbs, we've also apparently developed neurological, muscular, and ligature structures that allow us to train and then reduce those muscles over time as our situations change, where we are, in a sense, evolved well or adapted well for migratory hunter-gatherer lifestyles. We can put on weight. It lasts through the winter. We can build muscles when we need them. We can change the color of our skin to reflect harmful UV rays. Like there's
you don't see gorillas practicing multi-generational strategies, so they're not like raising cathedrals. That makes me think they perceive time fundamentally different than we do.
We have one of the many evolutionary differences is our cognitive abilities. We have an ability to perceive ourselves. I don't want to say metaphorically, but symbolically. We are able to think symbolically,
abstractly. Yeah,
that's a good way to say it. And I've sort of lost my point here, but that's the fundamental basis that I see the reality, and not that we are constructing a reality around us, but that we are each swimming in the same physical universe, and we are each more or less similar apes with similar families and backgrounds that are each forming pretty similar mental models that are at least close enough to each other that we can communicate in the way that a dog can communicate to a dog, and a cat can communicate with a cat. We are intrinsically really good at communicating with humans, and it's one of the evolutionary threads that we pulled is we've increased, especially in the last several thousand years. We've developed thought technologies to advance our ability to coordinate, to share information with other humans, and to coordinate human activity. That's so. When you say the thing that I want to say yes to you is when you say, "Are we in a spiritual awakening?" That's the awakening that I think humanity is experiencing, and I don't think it's spiritual.
We are not swimming in the same reality. The same reality is swimming in all of our minds, right? That I just think that you've got your cart before your horse, and it's making it impossible to see the spirituality that's at the core of everything. Science started. Isaac Newton was a devoted alchemist. Spent decades, writing up alchemical texts. Early Christianity was very much magical. If you go into we talked about this already, but if you go into the necropolis under St. Peter's Basilica, you will find old friezes of early Christian Eucharist, and they have a big kettle boiling away, with the offering in the middle, and they're all holding magic wands. Magic is always the language of the rebellion, the hippie rebellion, and it always gets co-opted and calcified by power. And we're just at the end of that cycle, and I just don't think that you can. Spirituality is what we have that the silverbacks do not have. An awareness that we are but instances of a broader pattern, and I think you have to perceive time in a certain way to be able to make that out. Yeah. And then once you make out the fact that a broader pattern does exist, of which I am merely an individual instance. That is spirituality, right? When you do things with reference to the broader power, that's why they raised the great cathedrals of Europe, to show the power of thinking not about your individual fate, but about the fate of humanity as a whole. And so that's why when you go to lay that, you lay that first cornerstone of a great cathedral, knowing you'll be in your grave, dead and moldering for centuries before anyone sees the finished product. that is a tip of the cap to the broader pattern of which we were all individual instances. And the difference between the individual instance and the broader pattern, that right there cuts to the core of what spiritual really means. And I think we've already said it, but that has broad economic implications. And I think that our overlords always want to convince us that we are tiny minds inside of a lot. You notice that's the Judeo-Christian. That's what we get from the Catholic Church. You are a tiny mind moving around inside a broad universe, and suggesting that you have some power to affect the universe is heresy, and you'll be burnt for that. You cannot suggest that.
And especially within the Catholic faith, where you are born and endowed with original sin.
That comes from the 4th century. That's St. Augustine who made that up. And that was wholly a part of making Christianity acceptable to the Roman oligarchy, who didn't want to forgive debts. Right? Sin really meant debt back in the day. And St. Augustine, who himself was a rake, he chased wine, women, and song in his early years, felt bad about it as he got older. And so he was willing to create this theology that the church endorsed that is like, well, sin doesn't really so much mean that you're falling into debt. Sin means that you're masturbating on the P-Hub, and you need to, and the way to get out of that is not having the oligarchs give you money back, but for you to give money to the oligarchy in the form of the church. And so that, right, you can just see where economics creates that. But prior to the 4th century, Christianity was not that at all. Christianity was all about flogging moneylenders in the Temple of Solomon, according to the Gospel of John. It was all about radical loving your neighbor as you would love yourself, the rejection of ego, the acceptance of the state execution of Jesus. All of these, like state power. Think about the power of the crucifixion as a demonstration of the limited ability. Like the state can only grab your body; they cannot get the contents of your mind, and so that's why they really want us all thinking of ourselves as physical bodies first and foremost, because then that's the handle they can use to grab you and throw you in prison if you don't pay your taxes or if you don't agree with the ideologies of the state. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't see how this little awakening that we are experiencing could be any more spiritual. It is so obviously, it was this way in history, and it's this way now. And that's why I think, like Paul Revere, we should be hanging, 2 lanterns and not just one in the steeple of the Old North Church, because it is not just an awakening, but a spiritual awakening also. Well, all right, gentlemen, that feels like an endpoint, I guess.
I'm really impressed. We just got through however much we did talking about spirituality and divinity and social change, and nobody mentioned mushrooms, like even once.
That is true. Although we did mention Pink Floyd at the top of the podcast, and you know how they'll throw out a runner in baseball if you hit a home run but don't touch second. I just feel like when we get to home base and we haven't touched second, aka Pink Floyd, it really is a big failure on our part. So it's true we didn't mention magic mushrooms, but at least we covered our Pink Floyd base.
Right on.
We'll talk about mushrooms next time.
We'll get you, yeah. Well, folks, this at the end of the pod is usually the moment when I encourage you to write us an email at nop@substack.com and let us know what you think of our crackpot theories on spiritualism and occultism and everything else we've rehashed today. And if you want to read some exciting essays about these topics, or sign up to have these essays delivered to your email inbox every Monday so that you don't have to go chase them down or miss out on anything, why then you can just enter your email and subscribe there at nop.substack.com. And with that, we wish you, our dear listeners, a wonderful week. We'll be back at it on Thursday when I will be reading this week's audio essay for you.
See you.
Take care, everyone.
Namaste.